Yo, 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 welcome to Black in a Box. The world has told us by black faces in white spaces.
Well done, Brett. Well done.
Kept me up. Yeah, it's nice not to mess that up. We have a guest.
Hi,
folks.
Tunde. How you doing?
What's happening? Hey. Good
How
to
you
be back.
Man like Tunde from Tales, from Plantation's
Yes.
podcast.
Everybody, I assume there's going to be like
Oh, that's going to be added in.
Glorious
Don't you
applause,
worry
yeah.
about it.
crazy. Like, because the normal presentations that I give is thousands and thousands of people. Nobody leaves.
The biggest rally.
Nobody leaves.
The
The
biggest-
greatest times.
Did you see the one the other day when he basically had a listening party?
Bro, when he's just,
Yeah.
we're going to do the music. And
It's funny until
and then you ask me, and then I talk about what I had for breakfast. But it's called the weave. I do the weave. They say they don't understand. They say I'm rambling. But I'm not rambling. They don't understand. Great times.
Tunde, how was your summer?
Well, I ended my 11-month break that was definitely voluntary. I started work again in...
Important that you added that and not from your wife.
Yeah, no, I'm not getting away from her. That is the one golden thing in this cruel, cruel, wicked world. Actually, that my son. Yeah.
Pretty important caveat.
You know what? I feel like as he grows up, he's just going to have to accept that there's going to be different times where he's not number one.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be one or two.
1B.
Yeah, one or two. Like, he's three
Try to
now,
help
so
you.
no, look, he throws tantrums now, okay?
That's when it's
Which
different.
means sometimes he drops down.
Oh my God.
You're not going to be the favorite person if you're telling me to shush.
But that's in the current arrangement.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Wait, can black children tell their parents to shush now?
bro, the gentle parenting is testing me. It's testing me.
Is that the gentle one where you put a pillow beneath them?
And they get a smaller switch.
He's funny with it. That's the problem. So we'll be in the car, songs playing, and it's a song he likes too.
Oh, no.
And then like Rach will start singing, and then they go, "No, mummy, shh, just listen." And that's funny.
That is funny. That's objectively funny.
Like, just his timing, fantastic. He's not too rude with it, but he's got his shush down. He'll just be there like, shh, and carry on with his. Right.
Do you like shush? Do you shush when he tells you to shush?
I can't lie. Sometimes it just shocks you.
Lord.
Yeah.
Like, you're not expecting
Come
it. You don't see it
on,
coming.
mad.
You're there like,
Kind of mad.
hold a minute. Wait. The other day, not even the other day, yesterday, last night. This guy was like, I made him a slice of bread, a little bit of jam, a little butter, nothing too fancy. He sat, ate it, and then he's like, I want more bread. I was like, yeah, that's fair. And I'm taking my time. He gets up, gets his his plate, gives it to me. That's no different. He's like, I want more bread, please. Like,
It's all going
still
well.
polite. And I still was taking my time because I was talking to Rach, we were doing something. And he said, go to the kitchen. I said, wait, no, let me not lie. I was in shock. I started getting up and Rachel said, wait. Because that can't run. I went, no. You can't talk to us like that. And I really had to catch myself because I was like, oh, that's my bad. I realized that's...
Fast forward like 10 years, you know, in Baby Boy, where Ving Rhames
Yeah.
That's going to be your son to
In his sleep. Just
Where's my sandwich?
Get your
It's-
ass.
It's ghost in power. As soon as he's old enough, he's just gonna be there like, yo, you think you bad on it?
Yeah, he's gonna
Tell me to get to the kitchen.
Oh, man.
It was crazy,
Yeah, there's some...
but it's hilarious.
It sounds it.
He's a funny boy.
That's the issue. Children are objectively funny. How do you actually parent them?
Yeah.
Do we? Do we? I think the main thing is I make sure he's kind and he doesn't embarrass me outside. He would never do that outside. He knows the difference. But inside, I got a feisty little boy, man.
Oh, man. Good luck.
But, well, the challenge on you then is to I guess, very much be a modern man. Like you are trying to show him the example. You are trying to respond in a way which is, I guess, against every visible image of what masculinity is growing up.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
What is like? How does a man respond to being told by his own son to go and get him more bread in front of his wife? You know?
Do you know what? I think it is important that we're starting to do this work now, right? Because one thing that I am very, very adamant on is we haven't beat him, not once. Not like actually.
Careful.
I've probably been like, hey, yo, man, because when he was younger, he just had a grabby hand, and I just be like, hey, get off me, man, what's this? And he let it go. But now, because he's got language and he understands, it's very, very intentional. As frustrated as we get, to have to be like, okay, we're going to take a minute here. What you just did there doesn't run because, right, you need to understand that you don't ask things in a rude way, even if you want something. If he wants to throw a tantrum because you're taking too long to get him grapes, if he carries it on, you're like, oh, okay, in that case, you're actually just not getting it. And as much as it's going to make you upset, I'm like, calm down, no, cool, no grapes. Like, that's it. There's a consequence to your behavior. Yeah. And eventually I will give it to you, and I'll tell him, I'll give it to you later, but right now you're not getting it because you did it this way, because you're behaving this way.
This is what I find interesting, because obviously you got two parents here. I don't know what anyone's parents were like with you guys growing up. Me, there was definitely an iron fist in our household. So I know that when it's hopefully one day my turn, things that feel natural, I'm going to have to be very specifically avoiding. But then I don't know if I don't know which one's going to feel natural in terms of like, this is how I was raised, but I actually know now that I don't want to be raised like that. And that's not me besmirching my mother's good name. She did a fantastic job, but times have changed. So like, do you ever have like an internal battle before you do the thing? Or is it just...
Yeah, I mean, so lots of different sources of conflict. Number one, my dad as a dad is very different than my dad as a granddad.
Right.
Of course.
This is always the way.
Classic,
As soon as he became grandpa, it was just like, oh, Ewa, are you hungry? Come, let me make you food. Like, wait a minute, this what? Like, I was not to say he never cooked. He was the main cook in our house. He loved cooking. That's why I love cooking. But there is nothing that boy could do. My dad's like, no, it's cold. Let's turn on the heating. Oh no, he's coughing. Come, extra layers. Have some food. Let me go and make you something. I'm like, what's going on here? When he finishes said food in our house, when he finishes, he knows the deal. Take your plate, take your plate, spoon, sink.
Yeah,
he knows that. He'll finish his food in Grandpa's house. Like, oh, you finished your food? Yeah. Where does it go? In the sink. And Grandpa's up like, no, don't worry.
No.
I said, wait a minute.
Can you beef your dad about this?
Oh yeah, I've told him. There was a lot of times, especially when he was smaller.
Yeah.
Like I've been pushing for don't over protect him, don't over coddle him, especially when he started walking, and there were situations where he is getting into situations that could be dangerous, but I'm trying to teach him how to navigate them safely.
Yeah.
And they were very much like, oh, let me just stop him from doing anything that could potentially hurt him. And I had to be like, okay, I need you to not do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want him to grow up being scared of everything or feeling like...
Sometimes he needs to fall, yeah.
Yeah, or feeling like if there's a challenge, his first response is, let me ask someone else instead of trying something.
That's got to be such a weird, like, dynamic to play out. Like, the father grandparenting the grandchild, but then the son having to parent the child and the father. Like, that's sort of like interplay between the three generations, basically.
Yeah, I think the What I find interesting about it is my sister messaged me the other day on Insta, was like this post about how different those scary parents become once they become grandparents. And I was like, yeah, but it's also needed. I'd be more worried if he didn't change, because that suggests to me that my own dad isn't learning anything from our experiences, right? When we were young, I didn't have the kind of a relationship where I could talk to him and just say, Dad, I don't like this, because my dad, my lasting memory of the best beating I ever got from my dad, he was on his toes like a boxer. I have never seen anything like it from any other
How old were
parent.
you?
I must have been 10 or 11.
Okay.
But he was on his toes. It was after church. So vivid. After church, we're doing what every boy does. Squash it, football.
Yeah.
That was it. It became a football. But my dad was like, this is church. You don't do those things in church. He came up. We weren't aware. We weren't on the swivel. And he came up. My guy took off his blazer, folded it, pulled up the sleeves, and it's open palms, so it's no fist, but open palms. But he was bouncing, and yeah, like there was no amount of weaving I could have done. He was just hit it smooth. But by the time I came back from uni and I'd done all my adulting, and suddenly I had a real job and I was doing all this stuff, we had opportunities to speak to him and go, I'll be honest, I feel like I didn't enjoy these elements of your parenting, and I feel like I missed out on aspects of life because I was so scared of your response. And I know it hit him hard, like he took it really hard, because he never had those intentions to hold us back. He kind of parented from what he knew. But the good thing for me is that he has clearly taken it on board, and I can see it reflected in how he's parenting, grandparenting our.
Do you have sisters?
Yeah, I've got one sister, one brother.
What was sort of the difference in like how your dad parented you as like a boy? Like what was the influence there, and like, because you had mentioned masculinity, like how did that kind of impact your idea of like what it is to be growing up as a man and now raising a boy?
Oh, good. Okay, a couple of things in there then. So my sister is both the only girl and the youngest.
Oh wow, double whammy.
I know, right? Daddy's girl.
Yeah.
So she got very different parenting to me and my brother. She's also 10 years younger than me. So all of these things, like it was gold mine.
I mean, she wasn't playing football at church with a can.
Fair enough.
To be honest, that was it. That was the key difference. If the moment she'd stepped on a can, that would have been it for her. But no, like there was definitely a difference in how we were parented. How much of it came down to our gender, I don't know. I think it's my dad lost his dad really early on, so his mum was running the house from when he was, I think it was before he was 10 that his dad passed. So he never saw this split of gender roles in the house, which in Nigeria I wouldn't say is that common. And what that meant is, from young, he demonstrated that leading the house he wasn't the type of dad who would come in from work, take off his shoes, sit down in front of the TV, and then wait for food to come.
Yeah.
Like,
Have a plate fixed.
he's up at 5:36 to pray, to make food for us. He'll then take us to school. Like this guy, for all of his, I think all of the challenges I had with his style of parenting, I don't think I will ever question that it came from a place of love. And both him and my mum were so clear that the most important thing in any marriage and any good relationship is that balance. Did I learn that correctly in immediately? I don't think so, because what I saw from them was less about the balance, but I saw the compromise almost to a dangerous level, where I never saw them argue in front of me, so I never learnt how to argue and disagree well.
Right. Okay.
And so my approach to relationship in the first place was based on not causing stress, not causing tension and conflict. I was very conflict avoidant for ages, and that was unhealthy. So part of that and what I've had to learn in my parenting has been taking the good things, which is this is a partnership. So he understands and he sees me cooking, cleaning, washing, taking him to football, spending time with him, giving him that affection physically, verbally, like all of those things, as well as his mum doing it.
Yeah.
Like there is no difference in that. And I think that is a healthier part of teaching him how to be a man.
Yeah, definitely.
Whatever that really means today, than necessarily having those, this is the behavioural elements, this is what manliness looks like.
It's what you see, isn't it? I think it's interesting you said that about about the way your dad was brought up with his losing his sort of father figure quite young, because I grew up super close with my cousins, and without sort of going into too much detail, because only parts of this are my story to tell. My uncle was like a really sort of big sort of patriarchal African role model from Zimbabwe, and he sort of passed when I was very young, and all of the three boys were sort of at different stages of coming of age, and as a result of that, like there was they were the only sort of male role models, black role models around. We were in home birth, like there was nothing. There was television, and as a result of that, it's quite it's interesting what you say, because I very much saw like my auntie, like she then became this sort of matriarch where the qualities just came through in her behaviour.
Yeah.
And the clash, or I guess deficiency, depending on how you look at it, of some of the things that the rest of the world sees as tied to masculinity. So like the sexual prowess, like relationship with sort of fear and bravery and access to money. Those things aren't really course corrected at home. So if there are sort of negative stereotypes and you've not got good people around you and good friends around you, you can understand how those things are not really sort of addressed and picked up on in someone's sort of day-to-day behaviour. But for me, it's like I very much in terms of masculinity, it's I pick out like what are the things that I feel like I missed out on, and I was fortunate enough that I had enough good people around me and enough good friends around me, and my mum and my auntie, and being the youngest of seven in the end in terms of the cousins as well, that sort of made sure I was okay. There's enough people around me to threaten me, to show me the way, to actually beat me, to make sure like that I was fine in that growing up process. But now, as I've sort of transitioned into fatherhood now myself, it's like presence is very much the thing for me. Like there's people talk ad nauseum about absent black fathers in particularly in America, but across the world. But like presence and in terms of like you mentioned your dad like getting home from work or waking up early, rolling his sleeves up, making sure people are provided for. Like I really sort of pride myself in that.
I'd like to ask you if you take that kind of narrative personally as a new father.
Well, 100%, and it's just like it's a minimum, because like you get so much from it yourself anyway. But I was like, as a baseline, that sort of presence and love and care is it's pretty much like a starting point for everything else. And people don't really see it. I don't think it's not something you can prepare someone for until they have a kid. And people say this all the time, but genuinely, if you end up in that position yourself where you have a child, like, you will understand like how that sort of changes your perspective and your willingness to do anything to help this person, this little child grow.
Well, ideally, like, if you are wanting to be a good, healthy parent, because not everybody approaches parenthood that way. And I'm not saying that from my experience. Like, my dad was great, and I grew up in a household with a lot of love, even though my parents weren't together. But it's interesting that you said, like, you mentioned that it's more of like an American narrative, that like absent Black father. And I know it's like not just in America, but I'd never really thought about it that way. Like, it really is a very prevalent stereotype.
I think American and Caribbean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because and this is what, we have these sort of cultural schisms and an increasing divide between Africans and African Americans about like various different things. But people have often joked about like what's the thing when you have loads of different wives? Polygamy. And without sort of realizing that the thing behind that is, it'd be shame if you had loads of kids and you didn't look after them. Like people in the African cultures that I'm familiar with, taking on lots of wives, having lots of children, people are getting cared for. Local children are getting cared for. If you've got people that like if you've got like someone that works in the household, keeping the house, she's got a child, take the child on as well. Like, put that child through school. It's in the experience that I've got with my family in Malawi. Like, it's quite a common thing that the ability to make sure the village is taking care of these children is quite a big thing.
Well, probably because in a way, really, that makes you kind of like an ultimate provider, because you're able to, you with your community are able to take care of multiple.
I'm not going to start advocating for polygamy.
No.
I mean, I'm not going to advocate for that, but I just like, it's just interesting, the difference in the culture there.
It's not just like, you almost sort of divorce it from it being like a sex thing. It's a status thing, but then with that is, I'm going to have to...
I think you also can't divorce, obviously, being a Jamaican man. Caribbean and African American people are there from the same situation. So the way that the family was created around Black people, it wasn't something that was a choice necessarily. So in terms of father figures and what that actually looked like, we can't just divorce the rates of Black absentee fathers nowadays from the fact that it comes from slavery. And that's not me giving all of them an excuse at all.
I also want to point out, I think we're looking at the good side of it. Like, there are, in African cultures, definitely in Nigeria, there is definitely that stereotype of secret families. Like polygamy, where you've actually legitimately gotten yourself another wife and you're legitimately looking after these. That's not for me, but like you say, it's a more honourable approach.
Yeah.
The number of people who, like, even in church, I grew up, and the number of times you'd hear, oh, so-and-so auntie's husband is still in Nigeria while she's been here for the last 10 years. And then next thing you know, like, oh, I didn't know you had a sister. Never did I.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like you said, Alahna, that desire to be a good parent isn't necessarily automatically in everyone.
No.
Like, there are still a lot of people who are whatless.
Yeah.
Even after they become parents.
I think one of the benefits that all of us, and I can only speak to the three of us men here, it's obviously different, but I think it's an important conversation to have amongst men, is each of us, to a certain degree, have put in the work before getting into fatherhood, in terms of acknowledging things that you might not like from your past, acknowledging things from your present that you need to work on, and where you want to be in the future. And that gives you a much better foundation, I think, to be ready to be someone's father, to be ready to be someone's partner. And unfortunately, for a myriad of reasons, a lot of the time fathers didn't do that beforehand.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I know that my dad certainly didn't have the right foundation to be ready for fatherhood when I came along. He did some work. He's much better at it now. But I think that is the thing we've spoken about it so many times on the podcast, about being intentional, because you will certainly reap the rewards now, but I think it's what follows that is going to really tell the progress that you've made. So it's amazing to see, and I think from the conversations that we've had, like, you're going to be amazing. I can't wait to see more of you as a dad.
We're trying, but it is like, I remember people saying like, there should be like a minimum amount of money that you should have to have a child, because they don't want poor people reproducing. And in reality, it's the barrier, as like you say, it's got to be, what is your willingness to explore the things which are not fully formed about you.
Yeah.
Some of your worst character traits, to make sure you don't visit that again on your children. Like, I went to uni with countless people who had lots of money and lots more unresolved sort of traumas, which they're going to probably visit on their children too.
Yeah.
And that is a far more harmful
Definitely
way to bring a child into the world, because the child's gonna be born with absolutely everything and absolutely none of the skills to deal with that.
I mean, and I think we're seeing the repercussions of generations of that now, especially in the media. I just feel like every other day it's like, is everybody a predator? Like, are all men predators? Yeah, but then like you trace it back. So I was actually watching Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez movie, and well, obviously I'm sure there's some like liberties with the narrative. Essentially, like, it is a story of horribly traumatized children who then go on to commit, a murder. But then there's the idea that like their parents before that were also, trigger warning, but like they were abused. And then before that, like they came from a line of abuse. And my mom and I were having this discussion of like, okay, well, where does it start? Like, where does it kind of stop, and where does it start? And I don't know. It just seems like such a long cycle of, like, if we're talking about masculinity and like the toxic side of masculinity, that like it just seems that, I don't know, it's carried forward for so long. And what does that even mean? Like, toxic masculinity? Like, how do you define like positive or healthy masculinity, and how do you define like when it's toxic? And especially for you guys, like, who identify as men, what does that even mean? Like, masculinity to you?
Oh, that's a big question. For me, it's not even the sort of. I personally categorize like masculinity as being toxic when you are almost entirely beholden to preserving or upholding these traits at the cost of everything else, whether that feels right or whether it feels wrong, or whether those, like, being that thing overrides everything else about you. Like, whether it's like the soft skills, the sensitivity, how you should treat people. That to me is when it becomes toxic. And I think, with people, when I did sociology at Greenhead College, people were saying masculinity is in crisis. I've been saying it for like 100 years. And that is very much amplified now because of the internet and because of the fragmentation of good ideas into little tiny sound bites. And then it's like, oh, well, this means X, Y, Z. Is it all true? Or because this person said this thing, this means everything else is true. And like the dishonesty and misrepresentation of some of the arguments around it. I don't honestly know what the way back around from that is, other than like an appeal to sort of really small communities, we've said, like making the men around you better.
Yeah.
And on a really sort of personal scale, and just hoping that is able to sort of snowball into a bigger, more longer lasting change.
I know you're not the person saying that masculinity is in crisis here, obviously. I always struggle with that argument because I don't actually understand what about masculinity could possibly be in crisis, because to what you just said, you classify as toxic masculinity as, for me, it's just acts that are centered around masculinity that there could potentially be a victim from, right? And it could be a woman. It could be you yourself. Maybe you end up doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. You are the victim there, right? So I think if you are stripping actions, if you're taking victims away from these actions, then how can there be any kind of crisis point behind it? I mean,
Well,
I don't
think,
understand it personally.
From a woman's perspective, I actually don't know if it's that masculinity is in crisis or if that men are in crisis. If you're gonna look at it from that perspective, because to me, this is also coming from a perspective of, I kind of think the idea of masculinity and femininity is bullshit, because you're ultimately splitting what it is to just be a human being in two, and saying that this belongs to one group of people who tend to have these characteristics and this belongs to the other. And even if you're like, oh, everybody has both, you're still creating a binary, which, so like at this
Gender's
point
a
in my life,
construct.
I don't know if that like even is a thing. But there are people who, you know, identify as men, there are people who identify as women, and people who are like non-binary or a whole spectrum. But I think it's those who identify as men who seem to be in crisis around the idea of their manhood or masculinity.
Loss of
If that makes
traditional
sense.
roles.
So
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you, but I don't think it is limited. So the reason why I think it's the masculinity that is the thing that is allegedly in crisis is because in that binary, a lot of people find their identity. And without a clear sense of identity and that foundation for people to stand on and say, this is who I am and it's because of this, this, and this. When you start to strip that away, it becomes less stable, and that lack of confidence in the footing that you are stood on really can shake people if they do not have something else to base their sense of self on. Now, this is not defending it, but there are a lot of people for whom they are. So if I look at the other side, right, for a lot of men, and it's particularly poorer men, right, they do not have wealth as an indicator of status and an indicator of value. They do not necessarily have education and intelligence education as a indicator of value. And so when you strip away all the other things that society tells you are points of value and reasons why you are worth it and why you are important and why you deserve love, right, ultimately, you're left with what is a historical definition of what it means to be a man. And it's not always the best, but it's something. And to be able to hold on to that something and believe that, okay, I am valuable. Someone will see me as valuable because I'm strong. Someone will see me as valuable because I can win a fight. They'll see me as valuable because I can get girls, because I can have children, and I can get involved in crime and all of these things, right, where you just go, I need something that proves that I'm worth it. I need something that proves that my value can be seen. And I think the other side is also true, because the patriarchy didn't just define what it means to be a man, it defined what it means to not be a man, aka at the time what it meant to be a woman. So that's why you get a lot of these TERFs who hold on to these very patriarchal values.
I was literally just thinking of one particular turf.
Right, of what it means to be a woman and why it's so important, because if they do not have that, they do not necessarily
And what's
have
your
that sense.
value?
Why am I important? What do I have? And that's why a lot of when I think about how we solve this, I'm not just looking, to be honest, I look less at the big picture, let's make this wave, and I look at the ripples. Control what you can control, and that is it. If that means the only thing you do is you take yourself to therapy and you get that help and you do that work, you're making a ripple in the pond around you. Those who are in your close vicinity will be impacted by it because they'll see the differences you make. If you have a bigger platform, and you use your growth and your healing as an opportunity to heal others, whether that is as a parent, whether that is as a friend, whether it's as someone who has a podcast and we change the narrative around how we talk about these things, you're making that impact. Little by little, we will make progress. It's not necessarily going to be quick, but progress is more important than the pace. It's also important, though, to recognize that we're not doing this in a vacuum.
Yeah.
As much good work as we do want to do here, there are people who are unwilling to let go of the harmful rhetoric and the harmful ideologies, even if the harm is being done to themselves or people they care about. And there are others who are outrightly, intentionally maintaining it because their power lies in others not growing.
Yeah.
It's the reason why there is such a strong move amongst the right to prevent access to education, to prevent access to resources like mental health support and growth, because the less educated we are, the less we understand, the less likely we are to challenge the ideas that are not good for us. So I think it's, it is the masculinity as opposed to just the men, because there are also women who are upholding those traditional views to the detriment of themselves.
High value and low value.
That's very true. But I think, it does all come back to like, I want to be seen and loved and accepted.
It's exciting to kind of be, I don't want to say like a trailblazer, but it's exciting to be where you'd like to think is the right side of history. Because like, I think back to our wedding day and the conversation I had with my dad afterwards, and he was basically saying that he was proud to see me and almost started crying himself. He was proud to see me crying and almost started crying himself, but he managed to I fixed myself up good, I'm good.
Just topped up the toxic.
Yeah. So I'm like, just the fact that conversation and within that, I don't know if I'm just reaching, but I was like, part of me was kind of thinking, maybe he wishes that he was able to be in a position to just be outward with their emotion like that as well. So little things like that, and you probably had this as well, like on the lead up to your wedding as well, Tunde. Like the amount of guys that will come up to you, and women as well, like, do you think you're gonna cry?
Yeah.
Do you think you're gonna cry?
Yeah.
Well, I found it bizarre. I was like, if I cry, I cry. It's what it is. Like this is not 1990 or 1950. Like I don't care, man. If it needs to come out, let it out. And it feels good that, I mean, for me, obviously, showing that you love someone isn't bawling. Like, I cried a little bit too much, I'm not going to lie. I almost got uncomfortable. But that isn't showing that you love someone. But like, if that is what your body feels like at that moment, that's brilliant. And I'm glad that I'm able to at least show to the people that were in that room and the people around me, like, this is a version of masculinity as well. And maybe the next person from that group that is in that position, I'm not just talking about black people either, they're going to think a little bit less about what it looks like if they're that person. So just, being in that position, I find it it's something I'm proud to be, like a non-typical, traditional black man. Like I'm trying to be open with the changes that I'm making.
Yeah. May there be more of you.
Not too bad either.
May there be more.
Can we heal Diddy?
Oh.
No.
So there is
That segue was handbrake turn.
I didn't know where else to go with this.
Pull over for something.
That topic has just been sat there, and I was like,
Gotta get there somewhere.
there's not a good way into that.
No, but honestly, like, we do really need to talk about that, because that's one of those situations where, like, it comes back to what you were saying. I do recognize that it's a combination of a long line of trauma, I'm sure, mixed with what it means to be a man and a powerful man and want to have proximity to whiteness, like patriarchal, capitalistic, like top of the whatever, like whiteness. But I still find myself being like, how did we get here? How did we get so many people willing to engage in this fuckery? Like, how did we get here?
Is that in relation to him specifically?
To Diddy, but then also like people associated with him, where like I am starting to look at them a little funny because they're defending him, or like have been in a few too many situations where some of this predatory, like honestly, actually just disgusting behavior has been going on.
Did you see what Bow Wow said last week?
No. What?
He was lamenting the fact that Diddy's away right now because there's not enough parties.
Yikes.
So I'm gonna let that slide.
Yeah.
No. This is important because this is exactly what we were just talking about. It's like, yes, we know what this person is, but our masculinity is being affected now because we can't do the thing that we know that we're supposed to do, or we feel that we're supposed to do. This is how we show who we are, and now we can't do that.
But it is overwhelming.
But the other side of that is, if we to give that the full context, that's indicative of someone who was a child brought up in that system, was probably abused at some. Well, that's not fair for me to say. Was brought up as a child, and there's a strong likelihood that growing up in a system like that, in proximity to people like that, would not have led him to the most wholesome sort of entry into what normal is. There's no that's all that individual would have ever known, which is why I'm a bit like, it comes out funny now, but
that
after
is an extreme of toxic masculinity, but you can extrapolate that down to the little behaviours that we have been surrounded by growing up, that we normalise, which are obviously sick and wrong as well.
Yeah.
Obviously not to that extreme.
And I think you think it's extreme, but again, from like a woman's perspective, it doesn't feel extreme. It feels like it feels like it's way more common than I think people really originally thought.
Than men thought. Yeah, because women, I think, are aware of. Yeah. It was like when that thing came out of like when they asked women, would you rather meet a bear in the woods or a man by yourself? And like by and large, women were like, obviously the bear, like, because at least it won't like sexually assault you before it murders you. Like, and men were so like riled about that, and they were like, oh, don't exaggerate, that's crazy. But I'm like, you wouldn't even want to meet a man by yourself in the woods. No. Like, but women are also not, that's not an exaggeration. Like, we genuinely would feel safer facing a wild animal. It makes sense. I think Diddy's is such a, I've been trying to work it out because his is such a weird combination of factors for me. So not only is it the celebrity element, not only is it the money element, because he has celebrity, but then he has billions. Not only is it the public perception and the media darlingness that was Diddy, he also was an actual criminal.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Like, when I think a lot of people forget that people like Diddy, Snoop, Ice Cube were outrightly banging. Like,
just
in the 90s.
Look at anyone close to him. Look at anyone that's close to him. Like, not that many people who work for your business should not be there. Like, if you're just making music.
Yeah. And it's that I think gave him a very unique position, because I'm not assuming that other billionaires aren't doing that. I'm not assuming that they're not doing it to the extent that Diddy is. I am not assuming that celebrities or musicians aren't, because we hear of plenty of stories of inappropriate behavior from musicians at their concerts, and the groupie culture from the 90s and early noughties as well. But I think it's the fact that he had all of those societal protections and the street level protection. Like, we heard what happened to whose car was it? Chingy's car?
No, it wasn't. No. Kid Cudi.
Kid Cudi's car.
That was just glossed over.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, what happened to Cassie's been glossed over as well now.
Well, yeah, to an extent.
I feel like what happened to Cassie is being glossed over because it's exactly the same as the types of thing we're hearing from men every other day, like you said, right? the Kid Cudi one should not be glossed over, because
What is
that
the
is
Kid Cudi thing? I missed
Blew up
this.
his car.
actively blew up his car.
Oh,
when
it was to do with Cassie. I think
Yeah.
at the time she was trying to leave him and get involved with him, and it was obviously a warning, like a mafia warning.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I think makes this case so interesting. But I completely agree with you that it is concerning that we're seeing this over and over again, and even the people who were in the spheres. So we've heard the story of Usher and the impact he had, and Justin Bieber, and the default people like Bow Wow, who came into the industry as kids. Like, I think Hollywood and the celebrity lifestyle is just naturally damaging to children anyway.
Yeah.
But to be in the sphere of influence of someone that powerful and that predatory, and then growing up into it, I think absolutely there's going to be some Stockholm syndrome from a lot of these people who are now old enough to know better, but too deep into it to make amends.
Well, when I was watching the Menendez movie, there's like one scene, and again, I'm going to give a trigger warning because it talks about like sexual assault and incest, but basically one of the characters talks about how like his parental figure assaulted him when he was a kid, and then he turned around and did it to a sibling, not because who was also a kid, not because he liked it, but because he was trying to normalize it for himself, because he wanted to make it like less, like not as big of a deal. And that was like the first time that I really like was able to grasp like this is that whole hurt people thing, because it might not necessarily be like, oh, I'm so angry that I want to now do this to somebody else. It could be that I can't even process what's happening to me. So in order to make it seem better, I'm going to make it seem like this is normal and like this is like what everybody should be doing. But then it goes back to that like, okay, well, who's a victim and who deserves compassion, and what do we do with people who have also been abused when they are old enough to allegedly know better? But if that's your whole world's view, then you're kind of in a prison of whatever the state was or the age you were when this started happening to you. So I don't know.
I think there's compassion and consequence
Yeah.
needed. Same approach as I take to parenting.
Yeah.
Is I can understand that you've lashed out of frustration, but if you go out and in that frustration you hit another kid, there's a consequence to it. Now the level of consequence obviously depends on exactly what you're doing. But yeah, I think while you can be compassionate and recognize the source of a behavior or the source of your actions may have been in such a way that you were a victim of someone else, you can only control what you can control, and part of that is your ability to break the cycle.
Yeah.
As painful as it can be for you, and I recognize that some of these levels of trauma are to the level that if you were to address them fully at a time when you weren't ready, you risk triggering psychosis because of the brain's self-defense mechanism. But the choice to then do it to someone else out of self-preservation is not an excuse.
Yeah. Well, especially at an age if like, because they start to hide that behavior. So clearly, you know, it was never okay. And now you're starting to like do it in the shadows as an adult. So by that point, it's like, okay, well, you know that there are avenues to get help then.
Yeah. And I mean, so to bring it back to Diddy, the most sort of depressing part about this, and it's tied into the conversation we've been having, was the response to all this, like online, was like people become fixated on the baby oil, people like clowning Meek Mill, like we're talking about people potentially victims. The entire dialogue was clowning the fact that he probably was a victim, and not letting that man sort of get out from underneath this unless he comes out and admits it for himself. Like I find it really sort of I feel like I'm inside like a warped reality that this like these things can come out about this person, this horrible thing that he's done, and you know I don't want to get all sort of dirt sheets, but the word is Diddy came up with Capitol Records under certain individuals, and it's all through like blackmail using embarrassment as these sort of tapes as collateral.
And where the bodies are buried, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's why people are then sort of forced to do this, whether people sort of just enjoy doing it or want to partake in it, whatever. But then to be made aware of all of that, and then the conversation is still like sort of fixated on a man's potential like sexuality. I'm just like what are we doing here?
Yeah,
That's that toxic masculinity though, because I've said it before. I remember having this conversation on the podcast about a once upon a time friend of mine who lots of evidence came out of him doing some deplorable stuff, and there was video footage of him performing a sexual act on another man, and that was the only thing that he was like, that's not me. That is Photoshop. That's not me.
Yeah.
And that is the toxic masculinity side of things. There might be some horrible things being said about me, but I am not gay. I am not gay. And that is the one thing that we're going to beat you with because you might be gay.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
It's funny because the first thing that came to mind that is to a lower degree. So I'll come back to the pyramid of harassment and discrimination, but to a lower degree, the K. Meet the Grahams allegations, and the only thing that Drake wanted to address was, I don't have a secret daughter.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I may be a paedophile. I may be talking to young kids. I don't have a secret daughter. Haha, you fell for it. I planted the daughter story.
Which is mad because he was clowning his blackness or his proximity to blackness throughout this whole beef.
Yep.
That was the blackest allegation.
Secret family.
Yeah.
I'm black.
He's real out of touch, isn't he?
But yeah, so coming back to the pyramid of discrimination and harassment, it's a concept that we use when we're teaching or running courses that are about anti-harassment, and it is those lower level things. So nobody starts at the Diddy level, right? It starts with your attitudes. So the racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, all of the things, that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And it starts in attitudes, small microaggressions. Okay, well, I'm going to clutch my purse if I see a black person.
Exactly.
Then it starts with the jokes, and then it gets from the jokes to the outright inappropriate statements, the outright racist statements, the Tommy Robinson's incitements types. Then it gets to physical violence. Then it gets to the point of homicide or suicide.
It's like you just explained like Elon Musk's Twitter rise, because that's genuinely how the trajectory that we're on, I feel, right now. Because think about when he really started to take a hold, it was retweeting things that he thought were funny. And now it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Is that journey that you were just talking about?
The more we normalize, because each of these levels, when you look at them just at face value, they are increasingly socially unacceptable.
Yeah.
But the way people travel through those barriers is by normalization. So the people who are around them, the less we challenge it, the more we just go, how it's just like that, or we laugh along at the things that we say are funny but are either offensive or outright discriminatory.
Yeah.
The more they go, oh, fair dues, I got a laugh that time. And we're human, right? We laughed that one time. We have that, oh man, I probably shouldn't have laughed, but now I've laughed. So can I call them out on it the next time?
Yeah.
And it just becomes harder and harder. So part of it, the way we prevent it, is the lower down the pyramid we can do it. Just call it out. Really lean into that discomfort of going, that's not cool, and that's not cool around me. That's not cool around here. We cut it off. We prevent it going up, and I like I say, I think Diddy's a tough one because of all the different factors that combined to create his case. But I think we're seeing similar things in, like, Tommy Robinson's halfway down path right now where he's inciting people to violence because he's risen up through the thing. But then the Andrew Tates, the YouTubers and streamers and podcasts who are starting with those attitudes and those small jokes that people go, oh, it doesn't matter, like, but the more normalized it becomes, the more likely it is to escalate. And we see it, even if it's not in them directly, in the impact they have and the people who listen to them, who follow them.
100%.